Good morning, everyone. For the meeting of the Combined Overview and Scrutiny Committee, can I remind you that the actual meeting is being broadcast. We'll move straight on to apologies for absence.
Thanks, Chair. I've had apologies this morning from Councillor Lindsay Burr.
Yeah, I think that's the only one we have. So again, we'll move straight on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of June 2025. Has everybody had a chance to look at them and happy that we signed them off?
Can I just bring up one point? Towards the end of the meeting, I did ask about the various pots of money that the authority has, the sources of funding and deadlines. And I remember you saying that the financial officer would prepare something. Is there any progress on that, please?
Yes, we're just trying to confirm a date, but it's certainly on the agenda in terms of a briefing for members.
Thank you very much.
So if we're all happy with that, I'll move on from to declaration of interest. Anyone want to declare any interest in any of the subject matter we're going to cover today? Great, you're all wildly enthusiastic and ready to roll then. Slightly unusual today in that we do have a public participation guest. So I'd like to welcome Roger Tucker, who just wants to take us through a question that he's raised as regards sort of mental health support within the authorities.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm largely reading from a pre-prepared thing, so if it sounds like that, it can obviously be distributed if it hasn't been already. I've been autistic for 3.5 years. I'm founder and acting CEO of an organisation called YARG, which is a very small micro entity called the Yorkshire Adult Autism Self-Advocacy Group. And the real aim of what I'm trying to achieve is societal integration of autistic people, beyond understanding and awareness through involvement to integration. There is awareness but limited understanding of who autistic people are, how they think, communicate and interact, and the challenges they face in a neurotypical world. Societal change is needed to avoid existing social exclusion, disadvantage and prejudice. This is a moral imperative. Action is required to bring about such changes. Autistic people are entitled to full inclusion throughout society, deserving equal care and love. The figures are stark. I'll go through them very quickly. Life expectancy is between 6 and 11 years lower. 79% of autistic adults will experience poor mental health, significantly higher than other marginalised groups. Up to 35% have planned or attempted suicide during their lifetime. 42% of autistic children experience anxiety compared to 3% of non-autistic children. Educational outcomes for autistic children are particularly worse for people in most other groups. And the final one about employment, which links in with item 7, I think it is on the agenda. Just 3 in 10 autistic adults are in work, compared to 5 in 10 for all disabled people and 8 in 10 for non-disabled people. That's a phrase from a government report in the last year or so, and it is one of the highest, if not the highest, or rather the lowest employment rate of any disadvantaged group. Less than 4 years ago, in my mid-60s, I was diagnosed as autistic. It had previously caused catastrophic problems in my life. I had lost my career, family, friendships, my home, and almost all financial security. I am now alienated from my 3 adult children. I felt massively excluded, losing my self-respect, and at times the will to live. Now I have at last gained a new identity and a passion to change outcomes for others. North Yorkshire and the City of York both now have new autistic strategies, the former adopted in March, the latter being imminent. I say they have them. In a week's time they will. 2 weeks. I've helped influence both. Both have established groups with extensive lived experience involvement to monitor their action plans and press for specific meaningful change. I would like the combined authority to be proactively involved in this process. My specific question is to request the commissioning of a co-produced report, or rather for this committee to urge the executive to press for the co-production of a report on the specific difficulties autistic adults face in entering and remaining in the workplace. Their different challenges to those with learning disabilities or mental health problems. Autism is sometimes seen as a subset of one or other of those. In fact, it's remarkably different, although there are overlaps. And the steps needed to support them. Mr. Chairman, that's my question.
Thank you very much for your question this morning. As you say, the two authorities have been working on this particular subject, and one has already sort of come out with a paper and a proposal, with the other one being imminent. Obviously, until they're both out in the public forum, we can't commit to tying the two together. However, we can request that as soon as it is, we can try and progress and come back with a response to your question as regards where we're going to go in the future with this.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I have, in fact, since I lodged this question, had email correspondence with, well, one in particular, senior member of the staff involved in this, particularly on the Trailblazer initiative. And it was a very helpful letter, and she's invited me to meet with her, which I do intend to do. Perhaps the supplemental question is around the subject of co-production and co-design. I consider it imperatively important to embrace these concepts, particularly with autism, because so much of the knowledge and expertise, in fact, resides in the autistic communities themselves, rather than with professionals and experts. I've got various quotes here of how important it is. I'll mention only the very final one, which is the Timms review of personal independence payments, which arose out of the failed attempt of the government to put forward a comprehensive welfare bill. And one of the points of that was that there was an absence of working together with disabled groups, which rather meant that time was wasted and delays and so on. The process almost had to be repeated. The Timms review states that the review is being co-produced with disabled people and organisations representing them to ensure their voices are central to developing the recommendations. So my supplemental question would be, when the relevant paper's out or you're in a position to comment on them, would you particularly press the point about co-design and co-creation?
Thank you. We don't usually take supplementary questions in public question time. However, we will note the details of that one. Do it. I was going to say, I think we do have some support from various quarters for it.
Yeah, I think it's something that we'll pick up with that discussion that you would have with one of our members of staff, and how we do that. But certainly as we develop our employability plans, Trailblazer plans going forward, we want them to be co-produced and with those people who actually need to have the service delivered to them. So we understand it from that aspect. And I know when we had the initial Trailblazer meeting with stakeholders, we had engaged with a number of stakeholders in different areas, so we would continue to do that. I think we're looking for another event later in the year, and we would be inviting you to that as well.
I think, Chair, if I can just come on that as well, and just to give you reassurance, well, the first round of Trailblazer and skills money we had came through to the combined authority very quickly. So the time to really do that broad stakeholder, unfortunately, wasn't in our hands. Whereas now we know we have next year's and we have longer term funding settlements, we can really make sure we're getting those more regular engagement with stakeholders and partners who are really shaping the piece of work, rather than it being this needs to be turned around in 6 weeks. Having that longer period of time where we can really get that wider engagement is exactly what we are looking to do at the CA. So yeah, we'll take that on board. Thank you.
I mean, thank you. I'm autistic, so I'm impatient. On the other hand, I do recognise it's a long-term issue and a long-term problem, and the
Yeah.
important thing is to get it right.
Councillor Haslam.
Yeah, Roger, I think I met you last year. And so you're obviously demonstrating some patience because you're still working away at this one. I think one of the most important things that we as a council need to remember is it's not doing things to, it's doing things for. And therefore, I will be certainly making sure that your voice is heard. And as I think this whole committee will, and co-production and co-creation are vital because you know what you need. So thank you for bringing the question, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak.
Councillor Burton.
So, well, as a visibly disabled person, and I'm sure that there are people around the table who perhaps have invisible disabilities, I know that co-production is absolutely fundamental to working to produce anything with disabled people, and it's the way to go. And I can assure you that I will do my level best to make sure that happens. I've worked on research projects as a disabled person with researchers that have been very well received. And it's just now, I think Tim's is actually working with the researcher that I worked with at the Law Society. So I think government is getting this as well, and that's great to hear. So I think you're not falling on deaf ears.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on, thank you very much for coming today, Mr. Tuckett. And we will be back in touch in the near future. So now we'll move on to the Mayor's update and members' question and answers on that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. We have sent through just an overview, but so I'll take that as roughly read because I know we all spend our nights reading papers from meetings such as this, but I will just touch on a couple of high level bits just to kind of add a bit in there. So obviously a situation with the Langdale, Flyndale Moors fire, which has been happening since mid-August time. Obviously, that's been a huge strain on our fire and rescue services, but just a big thank you to everyone who's been involved in that, landowners, say farmers, our fire and rescue service, other forces and services that come in and to support it on that as well. It really is quite an unprecedented fire in terms of the size of it, the area that is sort of covered in terms of its very difficult terrain, the incredibly dry weather we've had, now a lot of wet weather, which yes, rain does put out fire, but it makes it very difficult for them vehicles. So it really has been a challenging situation. But the fact there's been no loss of life, no injury, no loss of property is a testament to everyone who's been involved in that. And also just really gives a scale of how big our moors are, I suppose, as well. Just touching on transport, the director of transport, we're in the final processes of interviews in that position now, and the final stages of the active travel commission as well. They should be appointed in the coming days and weeks, really, just going through processes around that. Just on housing, and a huge thank you to Sharon and Laura, who are in the room here today, on the strategic place partnership that we signed with Homes England only a couple of weeks ago. I think we're the 9th combined authority area that has signed that, and that really is going to help to work alongside both York and North Yorkshire to unlock some of those sticky sites. Particularly, we've got 28,000 homes sat with planning that aren't being built, so we need to really get those getting built. And also a big emphasis for our regions, we've said time and time again, is the affordability and the quality of those homes as well. We all know in right across York and North Yorkshire, the affordability of homes is a real challenge. And we've just had an announcement of the 7.3 million in brownfield in extra as well for this coming year as well. So that's great to get those up and running. Men's mental health and movement activity and sport funding, obviously they'll be going live very quickly as well. That's around about £7 million to go in supporting men's mental health and movement activity and sport. A big emphasis on women and girls into activities as well. We know there's a huge drop off at post school age, so really encouraging everyone to be more active across the region, something I'm very passionate about. On a business trade side of things, obviously we welcome the opening of this new Schneider site over in Scarborough, about a £50 million investment. Really fantastic for that part of the country, and got to meet the members there and how we can really use that as a showcase of we are a place to come and do business. So really thank you to Schneider, obviously, for that investment there. As well. Generally, quite a lot of visitor and engagement's been going on as well. So meeting with with the Council of Regions and Nations and others as well, in a few areas as well. And we had also an opportunity to absolutely hammer Lancashire in a game of cricket over in Scarborough, which I was very pleased about. Which there was some concerns we weren't going to win, but I was never going to let that happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that report, David. A couple of things. Yeah, Schneider is good news. As former leader of Scarborough Borough Council, I can confirm we were always open for business. And my mantra then was, I'll have a cup of tea and a bun with anybody to get money into Scarborough, because every pound we get is a pound less for anybody else. Moving on to your report, David, about transport, and you may be more than likely what I'm going to say about the A64. I'm disappointed that there's no mention in here about the A64 as such. I accept that you are appointing a transport director. I appreciate the bus service delivery review and everything else, but unless that A64 is dualled from Hopgrove roundabout at least to Ginnah, choose how many buses you put on the road, they will never get to Scarborough on time. And it isn't just the bus services. We in Scarborough have McCain's, as you know, David, the Couplands, the largest independent baker. Boys stores have over 80 stores in the country, and they've maintained their prime delivery point at Scarborough. It is getting vehicles back into Scarborough in order for drivers to get within the working hours, etc. As someone who travels up and down the A64 a lot, I seem to spend more time in traffic queues than I am moving sometimes. So I would appreciate, David, as the Mayor, your support for anything we're doing with the A64 and at least getting it dualled. It's something we did from the left. We had a big launch. Andrew Lehman may well remember, with the then current leader of City of York and other leaders at Ferrer. Some 8-9 years ago, Andrew, wasn't it? Big launch there of fighting to get the A64 dualled. It seemed to fall off the radar, but I would hope that with your backing and support, David, we could get some movement from Hopgrove to Ginnah at least. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. But the question, just to note that, because it's not in the report, I'm not pressing government on it, and we are the importance of that dualling. If it was such an easy thing to be delivered, it would have been delivered over the last 15, 20 years. I won't lie. We are pressing the government on it. We have had some really good wins on road recently. Obviously, the A66 been one in 4 vehicles on that are freight. I think 12 deaths last year as well. So obviously there is the imperative to look at these roads. We are pressing with the A64. We are having regular meetings with government about the importance of it. It is a very costly project. It has been a project that's been speaking around, I think, since the 60s. I think I was told quite recently. So it's not going to happen overnight. If the money comes, we will do it. But we know that, unfortunately, without going too much boring detail about Green Book appraisals and this sort of stuff, investments in the north and on our coast areas have never really added up. But we are pressing with government on it. But if there's £500 million knocking around to dual the road, I'm not sure there is at the minute. That would be my concern.
I think the Mayor for his candid response there, and I appreciate the A66 is a very important route. However, the most important route to me is the A59, A64, because that's the west-east, east-west connectivity, and that brings the economic benefit to the coast that I've represented for nigh on 30 years, and bearing in mind that tourism to the former Scarborough Borough itself is worth in excess of £600 million a year. So it's worthy of investment. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I think you might know what this question is going to be about. You say in your report that government funding has been secured for Haxby Station. When is there any sign that is going to be released actually to the relevant authorities, please, to actually go on? Because Haxby Station was supposed to be opening in the spring of 2026. There's the land is owned. There's a planning application prepared, but hasn't yet been submitted. We just need to get on with it. I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of people in my ward, and they're still beginning to think that it's never going to happen. And obviously, the longer we go, the bigger the cost. You know, the delays cost money. And have you any actual correspondence that you can release between yourself and government about the release of this? Because I mean, it'd be very useful if you could see that, please.
Yeah, we are obviously involved in this. It is the Network Rail project, so it is with them. We are obviously working with them and government to make sure that the station is delivered in a good speed of time, but it is a project with Network Rail.
Can you confirm the money has been released to Network Rail?
I can't confirm that at the top right now, no.
So we're still saying the money is still promised, but not yet released.
It's there to deliver the station. So, yeah.
Thank you, councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor, for the report. Having staff in the transport team is vital to be able to deliver the schemes. And I appreciate that with new people coming along, and as dualling is a theme, certainly the dualling of the York Outer Ring Road is an important feature of delivering housing and the local plan, as well as providing transport links for a much wider area. So the new staff, what will they be doing? Because I appreciate nothing's really happened so far from your side for the obtaining of funds for the Outer Ring Road, and also the dualling of the Harrogate rail line, which is a similar transport connection from the city onwards, and more locally, the Dial-A-Ride, which is a vital provision that's been missing for some time in terms of bus transport. So I'd just like to understand how these new people will be tasked to assist with delivering those three items.
Well, as our transport team, they'll be tasked with delivering on all aspects of transport. So developing the local transport plan, the bus service review plan, looking at all options such as Dial-A-Ride, supporting how we can support the Moors bus, the Dales bus, the Filey option there as well. We'll also be taking on more responsibility with active travel. Obviously, I've just created a £4 million fund for there as well. We think in time, probably active travel funding will come through the CA as well. So we'll be responsible for that. And we'll be, obviously, we get the highways maintenance funded as well, which is delivered through both York and North Yorkshire. So there's a lot to get on with. What day-to-day workings of every single element of what each individual member of the transport team is doing, I don't have that to fingers, but they will be delivering on all the elements of transport that we are responsible for delivering on, including looking at strategies and reviews going forward.
We just have a follow-up on that. Thank you for that. But I think it would be helpful to understand when you are fully staffed, what these staff will be tasked to do, so that we can see how that connects. On a more local aspect, I appreciate your involvement with the highways maintenance budget, and in terms of active travel, there is, yes, you've got your £4 million scheme, but from the perspective of the day-to-day cyclist, using the resources that were released from the cancelling of the HS2 for road maintenance, as a cyclist, having better maintained roads makes it safer to cycle. And I can tell you from personal experience that the hazards that currently exist, and therefore understanding when that money will filter through is an important feature of improving the likelihood of people to get on a bike.
I don't disagree, and it's not just about road maintenance, it's also about setting the environment and the narrative around making cycle, walking and wheeling safer for all people, and particular focus which we'll have on is around safer streets around schools, because we obviously that's a big emphasis on making sure young people feel safe to cycle to and from and walk and scoot and everything from and around schools. It might be worth, Chair, if I may, for a forward, looking at the forward plan, maybe having when the transport team is up and running, maybe in the next 6 months or so, to have a bit of a view of exactly what areas ongoing we're looking at transport as well, because I would imagine by 6 months' time, things like the transport plan strategy and all these sort of things would be in place and kind of up to speed. So that might be worth for then as well, if possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that offer. Next is Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. So it's just about the bus travel. Generally, I just want to know a bit more about your sort of vision, because we've got various studies referenced here and reports are going to happen. But, you know, buses, that is one of the things I think where the Mayor can potentially make the greatest impact. And in short, everybody would want more buses, more reliably from their location to more locations. But you're obviously in a very diverse geographically region. So I'm just keen to know a bit more about you know, what you see as your future of, you know, greater provision for buses. The points we made about the dial and ride, which, you know, is something that York has made an absolute pig's ear of, but North Yorkshire has done very well. So, you know, more across the back. But generally, it's just to know more about what that looks like, you know, in terms of what do you want to see for the future of buses? And I suppose in that context, given that everybody wants to see more buses, etc., what do you not want to see? So what might be some of the asks that you think are less important?
Thank you for your question. So just on a couple of things, I think we've got a good opportunity with having one of the 3 rural bus franchise pilots, which we've been granted from government. And that really is to explore exactly that. What does bus or bus franchise or the offering of bus look like in a place like York and North Yorkshire? As you quite rightly said, Councillor Stewart, we're not a Manchester, we're not a Liverpool, we're not a heavy, dense city centre where to move people around and having a bus come every 5 minutes is very feasible. We are not that in a York and York City region, maybe so, even possibly like a Harrogate. But when you start going into the moors and the dales and places like that, it's just not financially viable, quite frankly, which is why we work already with the Moors and the Dales bus, and we're working with the Filey bus operation there about how we can introduce all those different elements, such as dial-a-ride. I believe, I don't know if anyone from North Yorkshire Council can remember this, but there's an option, I think, where something like a Your bus that used to go in around sort of the Thirsk, Ripon area. So there's options that have been running short-term pilots for 12, 18 months that didn't have that long-term funding behind it to really make more of it. So with our franchising option, and to be quite frank, for the conversation we have with government are very much like, we want you to build and model this because frankly, it's never been done before. So we need to work with all those different partners to bring them all in. So it's not just going to be one operator, it's going to be multi-operators, I would imagine, where we're using things like dial-a-ride, those small operators, but people like East Yorkshire Buses and First having a major part and say in it as well. I think we need to be realistic that our villages and communities, somewhere like an Amsway or an Orne, are not going to get a bus every 5 minutes going through the village. That's just not going to happen. But the big thing we take away from when we speak to people is that reliability of buses, and that's not there. So if you know your buses are coming 4 or 5 times a day and one is coming at 10 a.m, you need to know it's coming at 10 a.m. If it comes at 20 past 10, then you don't know it's coming, and you're not going to become reliant on it. So it's really up in the reliability of it, and that's where that long-term funding and support will come into it. So you have that reliability and being realistic, but it's also how we use our wider hubs, so the train stations, for example. So we know Ripon doesn't have a train station, whereas Thirst does. So how can we have those train station hubs, particularly as larger transport hubs? So how do we get people into the train station to then do those onward journeys? So it's taking all those things into consideration. What we don't want to do is see numbers of bus users fall off. And unfortunately, we have seen that for the last 10, 15, 20 years or so. I think there's 50% less journeys driven by buses in North Yorkshire than there was 10 years ago. So we can't be in that situation. We have 25% of under 25-year-olds don't want to drive, have access to a car, and running a car, as we're all finding, is really expensive. But then we have a higher than aging population, so someone like my mum, who no longer can drive. So it's like it's been squeezed at both ends as well, and we want to create an environment where people can move around. So the things are, we don't want to see loss of services and, the reliability dropping. So it's getting that reliability right and understanding where people are coming and going from, which those kind of information, which sounds very obvious to maybe people around the table, but that kind of information hasn't really been explored fully before. We also have an opportunity now to take down the borders of York and North Yorkshire and understand that the links from, say, a Ripon or a Thirsk into York or vice versa, or to places like Linton are incredibly vital. But then we do know, and people in this room may not, but people like to leave York and North Yorkshire and go to South and West Yorkshire, boo-hoo. So actually, it's how we create those links into places like Selby to Doncaster, York to Leeds, Harrogate to Leeds, up into the northeast, over from places like the northwest of the region over into Lancaster and places like that. So it's how we work cross borders as well. Again, we've never fully delivered or explored that, and that's what needs to be brought into it all as well. So there's a lot going on, but essentially it's bringing all those different bits that have already kind of been working some guys, how we can have a much more joined approach and real sort of bringing it all together and understanding what journeys and where people are looking to go for, and how we can use those larger hubs, say the park and ride round York, for example, which have now got extended hours, how those can be more transport hubs, how our stations can be larger transport hubs to get people for those onward journeys. That said, North Yorkshire, the car is still going to be the dominant mode of transport. It is just what it is. It's a huge area. We're not going to have buses every 5 minutes, but that reliability of it, if you have made an appointment for 11 o'clock and you need to get that 10 o'clock bus, and that 10 o'clock bus is one that goes here, you need to know it's coming. And currently, I would say a lot of our residents in North Yorkshire, particularly, probably York as well, but North Yorkshire particularly, don't have that confidence. I mean, I went to a village just outside Skipton and they spoke of the weekly bus. I mean, that's just madness in this day and age, right? And if you are relying on that, it doesn't come, then yeah, it's not good enough.
Thank you for that. It's reassuring to hear that the rural areas are well within your sort of scope at the moment. Next question is Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, I have two questions, but they're completely different. So if I could ask the second one separately, that would make life a lot easier. I was getting a little concerned about you not mentioning bus transport to Lancashire, which is where I'm from. So now that we've got the elephant into the room, then, but one of the things I would just comment on, and my question isn't related to buses, but is I think we need to take a more holistic approach to the bus services in the rural areas, and I think we need to be looking at the carriage of freight. And I think freight actually, the person travels free and the freight is what funds the service. And that's the way you'll build back. As chair of Scrutiny of Transport for the North, the number one reason why people will not get the bus is trust. They don't trust it to arrive. So so there's a couple of things for you. I'm happy to take it offline and discuss some of the other issues on that. However, I want to go back to your report, and thank you very much for your report. It gives us something to talk about in particular. And I'm piggybacking on the Haxby station. And what I'd really like to know, and it can be a written response, I don't expect you to know this, is I'd like to understand what the metrics are. So how many Network Rail measure stations in terms of number of journeys a year. So, and the reason I'm asking that is that in Harrogate, I've been campaigning for a small station, which is actually on a place called Clara Road. And I know you're from Harrogate. And I believe that that station would actually generate 400,000 journeys a year, which would make it comparable to Hornbeam Park. It would also remove a lot of congestion off the Skipton Road, which I know, yeah, but I also understand that it's part of the east-west connectivity, and if we can reduce that, then obviously that helps there as well. So as I say, I just like a response to understand what the metrics are around that particular station and see how this particular station stacks up, because I am concerned that there are more people tend to look for reasons not to do something rather than reasons to do something. So if you could come back to me on that, that would be great.
I will give you one rail stat, and it's a rail stat I think that is correct. that Hornbeam Park, I think, was the last rail station opened in Yorkshire. I think it was like 1992, 93. So that's how long ago we've not been building any new train stations. Really interesting point about Clare Road. Really interesting point generally about Harrogate. I think my mum still lives in Harrogate. It took us over an hour to get from St Mary's Walk to Harrogate Hospital a few weeks ago when she broke her arm. Hour and 15 minutes to drive 2 miles. Is that journey?
Yeah.
No, in that. I don't know what's going on with Harrogate, but the last 10 or 15 years, it is absolute gridlock. I can give you a written response more on the wider piece of Haxby and the wider business case and impact, because I must admit, I don't have those kind of details, but Graham in my team, or certainly with the Network Rail, the wider business case, and I suppose what capacity and everything like that's going to bring in, I can certainly give that. And then it might be a piece of work then to look at something like a Clare Road, if there's an option there, if the numbers are still similar.
Well, the platforms are already built. The plinths are already built. They built when the bridge was put in at Claro. So there's a lot going for it. Apparently, though, it's now on a slope, but that's another story. Thank you very much for that response. What I would say to you is that over 62% of all car journeys in Harrogate are less than 2 miles. That might lead to why there's congestion there. But during this time, since in the last 10 years, Leeds City has actually opened 3 stations. So there's got to be some mileage in movement there. So moving on to my second question. My second question is transport for the north, and I just want to understand how this combined authority engages with transport for the north, because it's a very good facility, I believe, for councils as well as the combined authority to use. Thank you.
On another piece on Harrogate, if I may, Chair, I'm obviously going over tomorrow to see one of the safer streets, 20-mile-an-hour zones around there as well, and the impact that's had of removing vehicles and improving those journeys for young people to school. As you say, an overwhelming majority of journeys, particularly in the morning around that, are school journeys and are less than 2 miles. So there's some real work to be done there. And it's a big focus of the active travel fund, and the work we're going to be doing is how we can work closely with schools. We have contacted all schools in York and North Yorkshire to ask how we can work with them to improve the access to schools for transport. And the overwhelming response was, we've never had any engagement before. We really want to work with this. We have tried before, but it hasn't been of priority for some people, so we are on with that. Transport for the north, I'm not sure it's one for this group per se, but obviously I know Councillor Hasme, you are there, and we as the combined authority do engage with them very strongly, as do all mayors do. It might be again one to maybe look at taking away and working with more our transport team about how we can have a stronger buy into that group. As you just touching on freight, we did touch on freight last week, as was it last week or the week before, I can't remember the meeting was, and talking about obviously A66 in terms of amount of freight, but obviously somewhere like Drax, which is the biggest user of freight, I think, in the country as well, which is in our patch. So freight and getting that off the road is really imperative. But maybe again something we can take away and how we can work more with transport for the north and whatever guys it comes to in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Packham, then I have 5 other speakers. 6, and I think we'll have to draw a line at that, otherwise our other presenters will be presenting in the dark to an empty room when we've all gone home. So Councillor Packham.
Thanks, Chair. Good news is I think my questions are very short. The first one is, you mentioned Haxby Station, so you know what I'm going to mention, Sherburn Station. Can you give me an update on where we are with Sherburn Station and whether or not we've made any progress in raising and extending the platform?
We are still pressing on it. I think my rail lead, Graham North, did have a meeting about it last week, so I can get a written response update from him if you like.
That'd be great.
But we are pressing on it, and obviously with our White Rose Rail agreement that we've got with Oliver Coppard and Mayor Tracy Braden as well, it's with that Haxby, half-hourly trains and other projects are all part of that. But I can give a written response from Graham in the next few days or so, if that's okay.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Second one then, you mentioned in your housing section about social rent, and we've been provided with details of the affordable housing on the brownfield sites that you're supporting. But we've only got the numbers. I think the most important thing for me is that it would be helpful to know what proportion of those affordable houses are social rent. And this may be a question that we can ask later in this meeting, but if it is, then I just give notice that I'm going to ask it.
Not want to put anyone on the spot, but it might be something we can ask in the next piece. If not, we'll be able to come back with a further response on that without putting.
Because I totally agree with you that social rent is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
The third one is a very quick one, and that is, we were discussing before this meeting about the potential for a meeting to discuss available finances that you've got. Can we have that sooner rather than later, please?
Yeah, I say, I think touched on the start, I think we are working on to get a date in that with the finance lead as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, next one I have is Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair, but Councillor Waller has already asked the question I was going to follow up with.
Moving on down, Councillor Merritt.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First of all, on the buses, really impressed by what you were saying earlier in terms of trying to address the strategic issues across the whole of the county and city areas. But can I just probe, you didn't particularly talk about York, and no doubt some of the similar issues apply to Scarborough and Harrogate. Obviously, 80–90% of the bus services in those areas are local. Your report talks about a regional enhanced partnership. And I can understand that in terms of this, the strategic issues, but how are you going to handle the much more local stuff and not in effect devolve responsibility up rather than down? That's my first question. Second, also on buses, welcome what you're saying about trying to ensure integration with rail. And in terms of York, we've obviously had the front of station scheme that's been progressing, but that was very much came from a place point of view in terms of improving the arrival arrangements for people in the city, giving the right setting to the station. But actually, public transport integration rather lost out in the current arrangements. Bus stops have been moved further away from the station. We still haven't got the sort of bus passenger information for people arriving by train in York within the station, proper direction to that. If you compare York and the opportunities with the southwest end of the station to what was done years ago in Hull, in effect integrating the bus arrangements fully with rail in that station. I mean, we clearly have opportunities to do that here in York. So I'd just like to seek some assurances that besides obviously the regional approach, vital regional approach, that we also do have the concentration on the more local. I've also got a question on housing I'd like to pick up later.
Chair, if I may, so on the sort of, I suppose, a whole integrated piece really, and making sure on the second point, like particularly York Station and also Scarborough, which is another station that we've supported there as well. That integrated element, like I touched on earlier on, it's how you can bring sort of bus, rail, and all options so it works seamlessly. So, for example, we know that the last train in Selby, for example, leaves before the last bus gets in. So there's no that integrated link in. Same place like York. It's how people get to that station, then from that station with using modes that are not basically the car and bringing more cars into the city of York. So making sure they are integrated. Again, that's a piece of the transport work that we are doing now. The local transport plan is how things like bus and rail and other transport modes are all linked in together, rather than not being aligned up how they traditionally have been. And again, linking into the wider York and North Yorkshire piece, just because we're supporting operations in North Yorkshire doesn't mean there's going to be any loss or focus on York as well. It's obviously that wider piece of making sure that bus in particular works for all people of York and North Yorkshire, and we have passenger engagement particular, and obviously groups like that you sit as well are really engaged in that process and making sure that there isn't any loss of maybe service here to support a service over there. York does definitely have challenges around transport. Obviously, we don't have to spend too much time trying to move around, and it is heavily congested. And then similar issues that we see in Harrogate and others. But it's making sure that we improve and enhance the offering in York, which we've already started to do with things like extension of hours at the park and ride, supporting all under 19-year-olds with cheaper fares, but we've got more opportunities to expand on those services. But how we can obviously have that crossover link, because we know a lot of people who are coming into York are coming from surrounding areas of North Yorkshire, and obviously having those journeys from A to B in a much more integrated and cohesive way is going to support transport and traffic and congestion in York. Because if you're travelling, say, just from those outer areas, a lot of people are travelling for a car, via the car, and it's how we can use those hubs such as the park and ride stations, and how we can start those journeys from A to B using better public transport, which again comes down to the reliability of it, access to it, and all these sort of things, and meaning people are put off and they will be jumping in their car because they know that is more reliable. Sorry, Chair, do you want to come on housing?
No, thank you for that. Moving on, Councillor Williams.
Sorry, as I say, I had a housing.
My apologies.
Yes. On the housing side, two issues. Can I ask what definition of affordability we're using for social, the social housing provision? Are we still working on the previous government's 80% of local rents, or are we doing something that's more appropriate for the very high housing costs that we have in this region? And secondly, in terms of the agreement that's in the next item on the papers, there's quite strong references, obviously, to affordable housing in there. But in terms of sustainable housing design, low carbon footprints, that seems to be substantially absent from the documentation. And given the combined authority's ambition on net zero, I was somewhat surprised.
Just on the carbon energy efficient element of it, we did also sign the York and North Yorkshire Housing Partnership Standard, which has that as a part of the affordable housing standard that we expect. It's one thing being able to afford to buy a house, it's another thing to be able to afford to live in said house, and obviously then the energy efficiency of it comes into our target of meeting net zero. So that is in our York and North Yorkshire Housing Partnership standards. On the social housing definition, unless you know, Andrew, that might be a question for Sharon or Laura in the later piece, if that's okay, if I can hand that over to those.
Okay, if you're in agreement, we'll cover that one off with one of our later presenters. Do you have any more supplementary questions, Councillor Merritt? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, Councillor Williams.
Also,
I'm not used to technology. It hasn't reached Ripon yet.
No.
Morning. Can I just ask you to consider, when you're considering buses, and I've heard all this about integrating and going to foreign places like Lancashire and West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, that actually for a lot of people living in market towns such as the one I represent, a lot of people feel isolated simply on their residential housing estates because they have no service bus to actually even get them into town. And lots of elderly residents are effectively caught in their homes and can't afford the taxi, and so as a result have an issue with social interaction. We have
work to try and solve that in Ripon, and you may wish to have a look at the blueprint in terms of using Section 106 monies from developers of housing developments and also shop developments, and working with North Yorkshire Council, we've managed to extend substantially the reach of the local bus network that goes around the city, so that now for the first time in decades there's actually Saturday buses running to parts of the city that never had a bus previously. That's required some financial input from the parish council, but a relatively modest amount of about £25,000 a year, to ensure that there are buses running before 8 o'clock in the morning around residential estates, which mean people can then access the other transport links to actually commute to Harrogate, to Leeds, beyond that. So it's not just about the bigger transport network. Sometimes the problem is right at the at the very bottom of the and I do think that City of York Council, North Yorkshire Council, working in conjunction with the parishes and yourselves, could actually provide a better network as a consequence, because there is the ability for some of the market towns that have town councils to do exactly the same as Ripon have done potentially, and put some precept money in to actually enhance the service and get something actually working. So I'd urge you to have a look at how that might be able to be rolled out across other parts of the area.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great point. I visited Helmsley not too long ago, and a lot of the business owners who were going to work in their shops and places in Helmsley were sort of saying that their whole bus network is geared up for the tourism visitors, so coming in at 10, 11, 12 o'clock, but not coming in at 8, 9 o'clock for people to get to work. And actually, nothing is simple in transport, and there's no easy wins and there's no quick wins. Everyone says there is, but there ain't. But a switch there where all of a sudden you have an operating and start at 8, 9 o'clock, so it gets people to work as well as supports the tourism and leisure visitor economy, of which those places are so imperative of. And that's those sort of things when we come back to doing the rural bus pilot, which we're working on now. Those are things that need to be filtered on. It's not always the big grand, mass transit thing. Actually, having a timetable in a situation where it picks where it's offering at 8 a.m. to bring to then take people on into work, it would have a huge, or into hospital appointments or school, whatever it may be, has a huge impact on how people move around the region much more sustainably. So absolutely, I think that's a great idea, and how we can roll those examples out across the region. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's two questions, if that's all right. They can both be yes or no. They're both yes or no, so it's fine. You may or may not agree. So we can say no to both if you want now. It probably makes more sense to hear them. So first, Councillor Merritt's question about the affordable rent definition. I'm assuming it's not set in stone at the moment, or you're not sure what it is. So given that, I was wondering if you had any views on what they've done in the West Midlands, where they've looked at affordable rent being based on income. Is that something as a point of principle that you would consider having that? Because that seems to be quite a sensible idea, is the first question. And the second question is on the farming front. Obviously, you rightly flag up that half of farms in York and North Yorkshire don't make a profit. You can probably guess where this might be going. Clearly, that's caused massive problems, all the sorts of things that have been going on in the farming industry for a few years, and all sorts of detrimental effects. What is your view on the government's changes to inheritance tax relating to farmers? Do you oppose them or support them? And if you do oppose them, what have you done to try and lobby as a voice of the reason against them? Thank you.
So on the first one, we are literally exploring anything that we can make homes more affordable. So any opportunity we have to do that. We know that it's about a 10 or 11 times average salary to house price in York and North Yorkshire. It's incredibly high. So we are exploring all that we can, obviously working with Homes England now, and having that strategic place partnership will help us, support us on that route. We also are working with government to showcase, have more flexibility around our brownfield funding, but also showcasing how much more expensive it is to build affordable homes in York and North Yorkshire because of things like land values, for example. So to go build houses of affordable standard in, trying to not knock any area in particularly, Well, I'll tell you, not well, Jake. But in places outside of our county where it can be a lot more affordable to build said homes, whereas in our patch it's just not. So we are working on more flexibility around that, because that sort of viability of how many homes we are building for the brownfield housing money we have. There is like a quota and a thing there, so how we can work on that. So we are exploring every avenue on that. On inheritance tax, I've been quite clear on this. We need to make farms much more financially stable, and you know, as businesses, they are businesses as well as farms, and we have 7,000 businesses in our region that need to be much more financially stable. It isn't just inheritance tax, it's Brexit, it's energy crisis, it's the impact of climate, which is having a huge impact on our farming and viability. It's wars in Ukraine, which we are not responsible for. So there's a lot outside of our remit. Obviously, government signing trade agreements with EU, with the US, with India is going to certainly help our farmers and our food manufacturers in our region, which dominate a large part of our sector. But our emphasis with our Grow Yorkshire part of the Combined Authority is to make the businesses much more financially stable, much more financially viable, and particularly focusing on their energy and energy costs, and how we can just make the farms be able to have much more resilience when impacts outside of their remit impacts them.
Yes.
That's my answer, and I'm sticking with it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Basterman,
Chair, it won't take.
he assures me this is a very short question.
It is short, because I can see the mayor is an extremely busy person who doesn't want to sit round the table with us. David, it's more of a thought, is this, on the back of my learned friend to my left's points about estate transport, one thing another. Would it be worth a discussion, your team having a discussion with North Yorkshire's school transport, where we see a lot of school transport vehicles parked up once have taken kids to school, if they could utilise that service between school times, that would maybe get people out into in the more rural areas or town areas into other parts for connectivity. And the second point is, on a route, say from Whitby to Scarborough, there's a section there of 4 miles of 2 villages that don't have a bus service. However, you know, the argument is, well, the Whitby bus comes through every hour, so you should be able to catch that. Unfortunately, in summertime, that bus is full when it gets to those 2 villages and just goes straight through. So, you know, back to your point, David, that if you have an appointment at the hospital at 11 and you know the bus is coming at 10, it's no good when the bus driver says, sorry, we're full. You know, it's more of a comment to take in when you produce it in the sausage machine, that was all. Thanks. Thanks, yeah.
Having been to a sausage factory quite recently, you'd never want to see the sausage made. On that, it was actually a really impactful byproduct of having the bus cap fare at £2 and now £3, particularly in an area like ours where you could go great distances for a very small amount of money. The nearer you got to your destination, the buses were so full that actually it really impacted local people going like 2 miles, because you could go 30 miles for a couple of quid. But absolutely, there is something to pick out between, and we've been speaking to East Yorkshire buses on it, I think, already, because they do a bit of it. What some of those buses and coaches are doing either side of school pickup and drop up time, and if there is an offering where, even if it is just like 1 or 2 services, you ramp that out across a large area, and all of a sudden it has a really big impact. And it might be people need a bus around about 10 or 11 o'clock and coming back at 1. So there is absolutely a piece of work in that. And also looking at that seasonal change. Again, that's looking at in transport. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but the amount of visitors we get into our region in that sort of 4 or 5 month window is brilliant, but it does have a big knock-on effect on our services, and particularly our transport services. So it's how we can explore about ramping up the offering again. No easy wins, but that's an option where we can speak to operators and go, we know we're going to get quite literally millions more people into the region. What is that uptake or ramp up of offering, which we've done with the Moors bus already in particular? It's how we can ramp that up. Again, is there options where we can look at that on the wider scale as well? So absolutely, yeah, all needs to be taken in.
Thank you for that short question. Very much appreciate your time, David and Andrew. As always, look forward to you attending our next meeting. what we'll do now is have a short comfort break, starting again promptly at 20 to 1. Sorry, 20 to 12. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now return to the agenda, and the next item up is the where have we gone? Yeah, combined authority housing update. But this will be in the form of the skills and employment update first, I believe. Yeah, housing, my apologies. So we'll do the housing element of that. So over to our two presenters.
Yeah, I'll just, thanks,
Three
Chair.
presenters.
Well, I'm not really presenting stuff. I'm going to pass this on, but I just thought, just as an overview, the report itself is really sort of trying to give an update on probably three key aspects of what the housing programme is trying to do at the moment in terms of combined authority, and particularly the establishment of the strategic place partnership, which David mentioned in his update. The Brownfield Housing Fund programme, which is a government funded programme of money that comes into the combined authority and then delivers specific outcomes and outputs. And then also sort of a more strategic element, which is really about how we're moving forward with housing framework and an investment plan. So I'll just introduce our housing team, because this is our housing team. So I've got Sharon Graham, who's our senior manager for housing, who will present the main things, and Laura Outhart, who is basically a housing officer now, doing mainly brownfield housing. So between the three of us, we'll hopefully answer questions as we come in. But I think Sharon's just going to run through a little bit of a presentation to start with.
Thank you for that. Over to you, ladies.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm assuming everyone's read the report, but I'll just quickly run through. I think I want to spend a bit of time trying to just run through the place partnership slides. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Let's just get the right slide up. There we go. Okay, so the Strategic Place Partnership is an agreement, it's a partnership between the CA and Homes England, and it's how Homes England seek to work in the devolution space really with combined authorities. So we, as David mentioned in his update, we got our Strategic Place Partnership agreed with Homes England, and we had the first meeting of the Strategic Place Partnership Board on the 2nd of September. So the Place Partnership for Yorkshire and North Yorkshire is all about accelerating housing delivery. And we've got within our Place Partnership agreement three strategic objectives. So the first one is unlocking strategic sites. The second one is focusing on delivering more affordable housing. And the third is about maximising opportunities around public estates. This slide's just trying to show the relationship between the wider strategic context at the CA on the left and where the SPP sits in terms of very much in that delivery space for housing. So the strategic context for us at the CA is around the local growth plan, which has been adopted and then works ongoing around the investment strategy for the CA that works to the growth plan. Then we know that we're going to be tasked with developing a spatial development strategy at some point in the future. So that's the kind of, in a nutshell, that broader strategic context within which the housing delivery sits. So the Place Partnership Board and those three, if you like, strategic objectives, we're looking to have, if you like, work streams or task groups focused on each of those strategic objectives, tasked with overseeing a delivery plan. Each stream would have its own delivery plan, but that would form part of a wider delivery plan for the SPP. So the box in the middle is about the housing framework and investment plan, and this is there's a draft of the housing framework going to the CA on the 26th, and that is also included in the pack, and that kind of is basically saying in a bit of a plan on a page where the CA is at in terms of that wider strategic context for housing. So that, you know, that includes the point earlier in the meeting around, you know, what are we doing about low carbon homes, and, you know, warm and affordable homes is very much embedded within that housing framework as a, you know, if you like, what the CA is trying to do in this space and ensure gets delivered. Because at the moment we're not a deliverer direct deliverer. We fund, but we've also got this new role within the SPP to sort of enable and work in partnership and influence and shape in a enabling way across the patch. So this slide is just trying to illustrate how we're looking to deliver those objectives. So each group would have a task group, and then there's oversight from that place partnership board. The partners in the room, as so to speak, are working alongside us on the delivery plan, the two local authorities, Homes England, and then the North Yorkshire Housing Partnership, which I'm not sure whether members are aware of the partnership, but it's a partnership of about 25 developing RPs working across Yorkshire and North Yorkshire who have come together collectively over the last couple of years to work in a much more collaborative and strategic way, and linking in with the CA to look at how to better deliver affordable housing, working collaboratively, but also in terms of the things around retrofit strategies being to that group as a key group of stakeholders. And it just is starting to come into its own now. We've got the SPP. So the chair of that housing partnership is around the table, and then it's proposed that those task group chairs will be part of the conversation at those board meetings to oversee progress of the delivery plan. This slide is just trying to illustrate the sort of paperwork that sits behind it. So we've had there's a memorandum of understanding and a business plan, which I think are included with the pack. That's already been agreed, and we're working on a delivery plan to have in place hopefully the first sort of iteration of that by the end of the calendar year. The housing framework and the investment plan on the left-hand side of the screen there is very much about how we are looking strategically to say, look, these are our priorities for York and North Yorkshire, and we want those to influence. They've already influenced the sort of the business plan, but really that delivery plan. So I think that comes back to the point before about, the making sure that homes are being delivered to the right standard in terms of low carbon and affordable to live in, as well as affordable to rent. And I think this is my last slide just on the SPP side of things. So, and again, it's trying to illustrate how it all hangs together, but the key point is that big circle in the middle about this delivery plan, and that's almost like this dynamic investment pipeline that we have with Homes England. And that's very much something we're working with the two local authorities on at the moment. So it isn't something that is like the CA and Homes England are doing. There are meetings happening with colleagues at both of the local authorities to understand what are their priorities in this space, particularly thinking about unlocking some of those larger strategic sites that are maybe stalled, that David talked about earlier. So they're just all of the slides. I think the framework itself is set out on page 21 of the pack, and that sort of illustrates what we're looking to do, or set out what we're looking as a CA to do in the housing space. So it's those wider aims about enabling people to live in warm and affordable homes, to accelerate sustainable housing development, and to increase and accelerate the supply of affordable housing. So I think when we're talking about, would now be a good time to talk about the tenure questions and hopefully try and answer some of those questions from earlier on. So when we're looking at the tenure mix of the affordable homes that will be delivered, so affordable housing is defined in the National Planning Policy Framework, so those definitions are set. So in terms of schemes delivered through local plans, those strategic sites, those local plans set out what affordable housing looks like on those sites. So that's a bit of a given. In terms of what we know really meets affordable need and comes back to your point about relating to local incomes is social rented homes. So we want to try and maximise the number of social rented homes that are delivered. And I think that's something that we as a CA are looking to try to support partners to deliver as many social rented homes as we can through the SPP board. So obviously the main issue is that social rented housing requires more grant. So we need to make sure that we're getting sufficient grant to enable us to deliver those homes. But there also are viability challenges on some schemes. So sometimes we might need to have some low-cost home ownership homes on there to enable the delivery of the social rented homes. I think there's definitely been a move away from affordable rented products, which is the product that's at 80% of market rent. Ultimately, as I say, the CA is not a deliverer of affordable housing. We are a funder through the Brownfield Housing Fund, and I'll come on to that with the Brownfield update, what we're doing in that space around affordable housing delivery. But the main point is through the SPP, we've got an opportunity to have a conversation with Homes England about what we need in our patch on those challenges around social rented delivery and scaling up significantly social rented delivery, which will mean we will need more Homes England grant than historically we have had. So hopefully that answers that question. I'll just quickly update on the Brownfield Housing Fund. Might need you to come in and support me on this, Laura. Sorry, because I know there was a typo in the table that was in the report, and I think that's now been amended, and you've got a revised copy of that. So the original fund, Brownfield Housing Programme, was 12.7 million that came through the original devolved funding linked with the DVA deal in 2023. So the CA didn't even exist at that time, and then the programme was being administered through the local enterprise partnership, working alongside the two local authority partners. And the original programme that you see on the table is very much the product of those early rounds of the funding. So the focus for that programme was around trying to prioritise opportunities for low carbon and affordable housing, but it wasn't a closed call just for affordable housing schemes. It was an open call to market schemes as well. So I think the call we've just closed on the 15th of September for a round 3 call for additional schemes on the back of the £7.3 million that we've subsequently been allocated by MHCLG. That programme was a close call just to housing association partners and affordable housing providers to bring forward schemes and opportunities, and we've just we're in the process of appraising or sifting and appraising those schemes now, but that is a 100% affordable scheme. So in terms of the numbers, so I think the programme is 1,150 homes, of which 583 are affordable. So we've been trying to sort of firm up some of those numbers. As I say, with some of this programme, the original round was around affordable. It wasn't about, oh, these are going to be social rented homes. This was about affordable housing in that widest sense of the NPPF definition. So low cost home ownership, discount market sale, build to rent, all of those sort of things would have fallen within that definition. So we're trying to tease out detail behind that, and we've got some ballpark figures for you, but we will be working with applicants from those initial rounds to firm those figures up and can report those back to you. So we've got, I think it looks like 230 homes that are sort of for low cost home ownership within the programme, 50 for affordable rent and 280 for social rent. So about 50% of the affordable homes are social rent with the initial Brownfield Housing Fund programme. I think it's also worth noting that until relatively recently, there were only 2 localities in York and North Yorkshire where Homes England would actually provide grant funding for social rent, and they were in Harrogate and York. The rest of North Yorkshire wasn't eligible for funding for social rented homes. So historically, there's been a massive under-delivery in those areas because we couldn't get grant funding for social rented. That's now changed, and we are looking and emphasising with partners that's the tenure we want to see delivered. So hopefully that's a update and answers your questions.
Thank you. Members satisfied that the questions that came up earlier in the meeting have been covered off within that? Okay, moving on. The first member to indicate is Councillor Haslam.
Thank you very much. It's never easy being a councillor, I don't suppose, because and it's not easy to be a council officer, certainly, because there's so many moving feasts, there's history, there's things that have all changed. But and this is the first time that I've been on this committee. So I am asking a question which you may say, oh, you did that. We did that 3 months ago. And I apologize if that's the case. I'm not aware of that, though. And for me, what you're doing at the moment is really helpful, but I think there's a step before this. So let me just take you through where my head is. So what is the size of the prize? And you're saying it's 25,000 homes over 10 years. So that, to me, roughly speaking, I think that's about £5 billion, roughly speaking. What I'd like to have understood is what has to happen to deliver that. So what really has to happen? So for example, do we have the capability? And I appreciate we are an enabler and not a prime deliverer. So we're an enabler and a facilitator. So my question is what capability and capacity would be necessary to build this? And you also mentioned retrofit. So is there a place here where, and it spills into the next conversation about skills, I guess, that we could actually use some of this to set up an industry or industries that support the construction industry so that the materials are on a small supply chain? So one of my questions is what has to happen in order for us to do this? And what is it that we have to do to build that capability and capacity? And if I just take that slightly further forward, you've done an agreement for 5 years, whereas we're actually talking about something that's over 10 years. So I know it may not have been within your powers, but presumably a 10-year agreement would have been, particularly as the sums are quite vast, but as far as local authorities are concerned, in terms of getting that level of agreement. And although you put detail in there, I'd like to have understood if we're getting 2,500, if we have to develop or build 2,500 houses a year, what does that really look like? So as I say, my question is, where's the capability and capacity coming for this? I can see the governance, but not the capability and capacity. Thank you.
I'll pick up that, and Sharon and pull it if need be. I think in some ways it's a sort of question that we're asking ourselves in terms of the partnership at the moment. So some of the things that we're trying to do at the moment is to understand. So those figures are very much coming from the process of the figures coming out of government for the local area and so on and so forth, and that's for volume. There's also an element that's come through some of the work that's been done on trying to identify what that particular affordable housing need is. Now, what we obviously, and we all recognise, is that number is significantly higher than anything that's been delivered currently in the area. And so what we're trying to identify and working with the two authorities, particularly on this, is trying to identify what is required to unlock that level of housing, and what capacity and what tools are required to do that. And I think that's what we're talking about within the partnership around the delivery plan. The delivery plan is about saying, actually, this is what it would look like, and these are the key things that would be required if we were to deliver at that level. You know, and as an example, if it's 2,500 affordables, there's roughly, correct me if I'm wrong, but around 900 a year only being provided at the moment. So if you're moving from 900 to 2.5, that is a big leap, which probably can't be done immediately the next year. And so that 2.5 becomes 3, becomes 4. So I think what we're saying at the moment is, and I think that's why we call it the challenge, because it is a challenge. And this part of that challenge is, let's work together to identify, we don't have all the answers, to identify exactly what you've set out, Councillor Haslam, in terms of some of those key things around what that is. Capacity is a major issue. And I don't think it's just capacity in construction, it's capacity in the supply chain, it's capacity in construction, it's capacity in the authorities, it's capacity in the registered providers and the housing association. So there's a lot of issues around capacity and resources. So we need to understand fully that and how that can be addressed, or can it be addressed in different ways? So that's a quick way of saying I don't have the answer, but it's what we're trying to work through as part of this partnership.
That's really helpful, thank you. And just taking a note from one of our earlier speakers, maybe we can co-create with some of the developers, etc., and all the different partners that you have listed out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the next councillor with a question, Councillor Merritt.
Yes, there's slightly off the main part, but there's a reference here to the situation of holiday impacts, growth of Airbnbs and so on. That's obviously, you know, it's a big issue locally in York. We reckon there's over 2,500 now in York at the London. That was a count, I think, a year and a half ago, which is equivalent to 3 years' housing supply. So it's a very substantial issue. I know there's issues in other parts of the region, the Whitbys and other tourist hotspots. So what specifically is being done on that?
I think what we're trying to do is work with Homes England to use some of their expertise and capacity to just get a handle on the scale and extent of that. It's actually quite tricky to quantify numbers of holiday lets. I think the council's done a really good job of looking at second homes. I think maybe the holiday lets issue is slightly more tricky. So I think there's another local authority, a CA area that Homes England have been working with to do this. So we're looking to learn from that and maybe look to map that, which will help us quantify and then explore, I think, potentially what policy tools could be used. I think ultimately it will be some kind of change. It will need some kind of change to planning regulations. Apologies, I'm not a planner, so I'm not really familiar with the mechanisms of how that would work, but I think what we need to do at this stage is just try and get the evidence to make the case and make the point, really, and try and map that spatially so we know where those hotspots are.
Just to double check, do we have any supplementary questions?
No, not on this occasion. Thank you.
No. Is it directly on what we've just covered off? Right. Well, I did have another speaker before that, but please go ahead.
I just wondered how imminent this inquiry is into holiday lets, because I represent a city centre ward and it's a huge problem. Because I think it's an urgent issue.
In terms of Homes England, I flag the ask, if you like, for the resources and the capacity, because we would be relying on them to help us with that work. So I would hope it's something that we could see happening within the next 6 months, but we're reliant on the resources from Homes England to help us in that work.
Thank you.
Next question is from Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is my first meeting. So just as a general point, given how infrequent these meetings are, my personal view, it'd be better if the mayor or one of his deputies was here throughout, because I think there's big overlaps between policy and process. Just my personal view. I appreciate he's got pressures on his time. My question on the Brownfield Housing Fund, I'm sure I should know the answer to this. I assume these are all, I think Sharon used the word grant. These are all grants that we will never see the money again. Is that the case? Okay. Is that?
In terms of the Brownfield Housing Fund money, yes, that's a grant, but I think it's worth bearing in mind the intervention rate for the initial rounds was only 14,000 per home. So it's a very small amount of subsidy that's going into the programme and the scheme.
Okay, fine. And so raise that, is that the only way that the Brownfield Housing Fund can be spent when it comes from government, that we have to be, so we couldn't, for example, as an authority, leverage, the CA couldn't leverage it, and it can't, for example, loan money. We have to physically give the money away, do we?
Sorry, we can't loan the money, but what we do look at on every scheme is the viability. So if there is a potential that a scheme coming forward in the future would start to have some overage or something, then in theory we would be able to receive that overage from those schemes. So that's a scheme that's making more profit later in the time. But as a pure loan for the brownfield, it isn't a loan scheme, it is just a grant scheme. So it's just getting into complications of technicalities, but yes, if one of these projects starts to raise a lot more money in the future, then in theory there is a clause within some of the agreements that enables that to come back. But it's generally on most schemes it's unlikely to happen. One, we're dealing with the registered providers, we're dealing with the housing associations. The other is that these are checked through viability, and the viability is identifying that there is a gap of shortage of funding, which therefore can only be filled by grant, not by loan.
Okay, moving on, Councillor Fisher.
Thanks, Chair. This may be related to that, and I suspect the answer may come down to viability, but looking at the actual table that was produced, a lot of these schemes seem to produce a decent amount of bang for your buck in terms of housing delivery and social housing, affordable housing. The one that stands out is the Heworth Green Zone B, which, although it provides a very sizable number of houses for the £4 million investment, only has 40 affordable houses. Now, sitting on the planning committee for the last few years, that is well below the level that would normally be expected on a brownfield site, which is 20%. Is that down to viability issues due to decontamination of the old site?
Yes, that would be exactly the reason, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is from Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment, really. It's just that when we define affordable homes, I think one of the things we have to think about now is affordable to run. So, which is just to back up the fact that we need these to be of the highest standard in terms of heating, and energy usage, etc., etc. So I just really want to reinforce that, because that was actually highlighted on the news this morning. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And the next questioner is Councillor Basterman.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, can you confirm if the allocated money is not used on a site, or that site fails to deliver it because the developer's pulled out, can that money be wired over to another site, please?
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do in theory is to overcommit, because we will have some of these projects that will slip and drop. So yes, we can, as long as it's in the criteria of the brownfield housing programme, we can move money between schemes and bring other schemes forward. The reason for the third call that we're just going through at the moment isn't just primarily to cover the extra 7.whatever million we've got. It's also to make sure we've got enough schemes to ensure we're not giving any of the money back to government.
Thanks for that, Andrew. It was just on the back of Councillor Stewart's loaning it to another one, that was all. But for clarity, it can be wired over. Yeah, but thank you, Chair.
And over to Councillor Packham.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm struggling to understand delivery here. Sorry. We start from the idea that the emphasis should be on social renting. And I think you're saying that 2,500 affordable houses a year should be what we're trying to achieve. Is that correct?
So that's based on the ballpark figures from the two local plans, evidence bases around what's needed in each locality in terms of affordable housing.
I think the difficulty is you've said that currently with sites with planning permission, there's only 900 are affordable. We don't know how many of them are social rent, but I would say from my experience from being on the planning committee, very few of them are. I suspect they're mainly right to buy or something like that.
I think the issue often with sites that come forward that are allocated sites in the local plan and come through, that you'll see through planning committee, unless they're brought forward by a social housing provider, so whether that's the council as a developer or an RP, that they'll be subject to viability challenges, and so you are often don't meet your affordable housing targets within your local plan, and it is a massive challenge. And that's where through the SPP we will be looking to try to quantify how can we try to stop that happening? How can we try to maybe access grant from Homes England to bring up those targets to address those gaps?
You might be able to on some of the existing sites, but they're often there's often been given planning permission in a context where the policy background says, or it's even been agreed in committee that they can just achieve 20%. So the ones that have already got planning permission, I think you've got very little leverage on. That then means that with the ones that get new planning permission, they can't all be supported under the Brownfield Fund. So I think that it's a hell of a challenge.
Yeah, I think the we're not talking about supporting all of the new homes through the Brownfield Housing Fund. I think we're just trying to say that when we use the Brownfield Housing Fund resources that we've got, we try to make sure that that funding is prioritised to deliver new affordable.
I mean, that's
homes.
very good. I think what you've achieved with that is good. But at the end of the day, you've only achieved 290 social rented houses, which is impressive on the sites that you've worked on. But I just really worry about how we're going to hit the targets, given that a lot of the stuff that will be getting planning permission or has planning permission, the level of affordable housing is already determined.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue with a lot of the legacy sites, the legacy local plans in North Yorkshire. So hopefully as you move towards a new local plan in North Yorkshire, that might help address
it. It won't address it on the ones that have already got permission to, or even that were allocated in old local plans. Probably.
No, all we can look to do is work with providers of affordable housing to see whether there are opportunities on those sites to bring in grant funded affordable homes using Homes England grant. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't disagree that it's a challenge to go back and try and increase numbers, but legally it would be a minefield, and I think you find that builders would challenge rather heavily if we change the rules of the game at this stage. Next person with their question is Councillor Merritt.
Yes, it was a supplementary to one of your responses about the basically working to the local plans. I mean, obviously, you've mentioned the legacy issue with North Yorkshire's. I mean, there's also obviously an issue with the York local plan, although it's just been adopted. My recollection is that in terms of meeting the affordable housing requirement in the city, it only potentially would meet 45% at maximum, possibly only 35% of the affordable housing need in the city. So strategically, we need to go beyond the local plan. So I just wondered how you're handling that.
So really that's the focus of that work stream too that I talked about, the increasing or building more affordable housing. That's exactly focusing on, well, if we think we can get this much through the local plans, this is the gap between what we actually need and what the local plan thinks it can deliver. That's working with providers to understand how do we scale up delivery, and Homes England are in the room for those conversations because they are pivotal to scaling up delivery, because if we can't access the grant from Homes England, then we can't scale up. So it's really very much a collaborative piece between the two local authorities, the CA, Homes England, and all the partners that are looking to deliver the affordable housing.
Thank you. Having no further questions or anyone indicating they have further questions, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and round this section up, because I can see the next team are in the starting blocks ready to go. So thank you very much for today. Over to you with a skills and employment update.
Thank you. This really is a kind of overarching report just on the progress that we've been making across a range of skills and employment programmes that we've been delivering through the combined authority. As you can see from the list, there's quite an extensive list there, and over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, this has been increasing as we've received more kind of programmes and offers of things through central government. The team have been working at pace to actually respond to this and to be able to deliver on the ground across the range of these activities. And as you'll be aware, as of August of this year, we became the Commissioner of the Adult Skills Fund as well, and Vicky's here to talk a little bit about that as well. So we're only really going to give you the headlines against each of these programmes. Do I? Oh, thank you. Sorry. So we'll start with the Skills Innovation Fund. This is a fund through the Mayoral Investment Fund. It's 2.5 million that we have, and it runs over 2 years from 2025 to 2027. This is very much about building capacity across our skills provider base, and that's right across our FE colleges, our independent training providers. It's right across the range of our skills providers. And it's very much about looking at more flexible ways of delivering skills training as well, recognising this needs to fit the needs of individuals and of businesses. It needs to be more flexible and modular in how we deliver it. And also targeted to our growth sectors as well. So we've made 3 awards in terms of that fund. One is to a consortium of FE colleges and skills providers, and that's very much around supporting skills development linked to digital and low carbon. Better Connect, which that funding is for the Step Up programme. That's very much about first steps into learning and training. And then the University of York Creative and York Creatives, that's a programme that's around creative technology skills training. If we move on to the Careers Hub, that's an annual contract that we have with the Careers and Enterprise Company. There's 380k approximately available under that funding. This is the work that we do through the Careers Hub. So there's approximately about 77 schools and colleges right across the area that form part of this Careers Hub. And the focus is around improving kind of the careers provision, looking at boosting our skills pathways, and particular in this academic year, the focus is around the modern work experience offer. So there'll be a lot of work that will be going into that particular area this year. In terms of the Connect to Work programme, this is a Department for Work and Pensions programme. It's a supported employment programme. This is really about placing people into employment and supporting them to stay in employment as well. And our focus there is around those people that are economically inactive or have health and disability issues. So we've been working really closely with the 2 local authorities because they already deliver an element of this to look at how we can build on that. But there'll also be a procured element to this where we're going out to the market to get some provision as well. We're going through the delivery plan approval process with DWP at the moment. We're positively progressing through that, so we're hoping to get approval really soon. And the delivery date for that will be as of January of next year. In terms of the Economic Inactivity Trailblazer, this is another DWP programme. We're one of 8 trailblazers across the country. This has a focus on economic inactivity as well, particularly around long-term health issues. So we have 10 million that's allocated around this funding, and we've just heard there'll be an additional 10 million or up to 10 million for the next financial year as well. So we're actually started delivery on the ground of this. It has taken a little time to get this up and running, and we're delivering against 3 priority themes, which is about joining up provision. So we've got a more kind of seamless and holistic approach to things, how we work with businesses so we can develop and promote good work, and how we engage and support individuals on the ground. So like I said, we started delivering against all of those, and we're now looking at the year 2 delivery plan and what we want to take forward from this programme. It is a test and learn one, so it's very much about what we're learning and what we want to feed into year 2 of the delivery plan. The next one on the list is UK Shared Prosperity Fund, People and Skills. Now, we only have this funding until March of this financial year. We have 2.7 million, and that's funding 3 overarching programmes. One is through Better Connect, the Rise to Thrive programme. We're also channeling some Trailblazer funding through this particular initiative. It's a long-standing community partnership kind of delivery model that works with people to support them to become more employable and to get closer towards the labour market. We've also funded the Multiply programme, which focuses on engaging people around English, maths and digital skills. It's a very much a kind of first steps engagement programme. And the final piece on UK Share Prosperity Fund is the LEAD programme, which is Leadership Excellence and Development Programme. This is a skills programme that's aimed at employers around developing leadership and management skills. I think I'll take a breath there and hand over to Vicky, if that's okay.
I'll jump in at this point. So I oversee the Adult Skills Fund and the Skills Bootcamps programmes. So as Tracy mentioned, the Adult Skills Fund, it's not necessarily new to the area, but we have just received devolution from the 1st of August, so that we are now responsible for the Adult Skills Fund and the free courses for jobs. It's funding for adult learners aged 19 plus. There are some eligibility criteria that they need to meet. Quite complex, but we've got some funding and performance management rules that are published on our website that goes into great detail about that. It's 10.85 million, which covers the Adult Skills Fund, free courses for jobs, and some additional funding that we've recently received for a construction skills package. We have granted 15 providers, which is 79% of the total funding. So that's about 8.5 million that we allocated. So that was through an approved commissioning plan that we agreed last year with the Combined Authority. And we went out to procure a total of 1.3 million, which is about 12% of the total value. And we got an additional 7 providers for that. So we've got a total of 22 providers working on the Adult Skills Fund for the upcoming academic year. That leaves us with somewhere just over 400,000 remaining for us to see whether or not there might be any growth that takes place within this year, or if there's any additional procurement that we might need to do. So if there's any new demands that arise, any kind of test and learn pots that we might want to consider over the next year. It doesn't have to be spent in year. So if there's any underspend, it can roll over. And it is an annual fund that we will receive. The procure providers we've only given 1-year contracts to, which was part of the commissioning plan that we put forward last year. The grant providers have got a 2-year contract with the option to extend for an additional year. We will be considering future commissioning over the next few months. So that's what we'll be considering for the next academic year, to see where we land with that. And the additional 160,000, we've just put an options appraisal through, and the decision for that is to match the DFE's model, so that we will actually be going to our existing free courses for jobs providers to offer that funding out. So that will be taking place this week, because the decision was published last week. Skills boot camps. So we are currently delivering wave 6 of skills boot camps, which is a total of about 2.9 million. We've contracted out the full value of that now, and that was all through procured funding. So we've got providers that have started delivery on that June this year, and that runs up. Delivery completes March next year, but then there's targets for outcomes for progressions that can take place up until September next year. So hopefully you'll be able to see from kind of everything that we've gone through and the whole skills package, we've got a full offer for the region. It kind of goes from the very start of delivery right up until level 3, level 4. Skills boot camps can deliver right up until level 3. So we look to align all of the delivery that we've got in the skills arena, and I think it's just short of 30 million annually that we're currently delivering across all of the skills packages. But I will pass over to Tracy just to discuss the final subject, which is the Get York and North Yorkshire working plan.
Yeah, so on this one, there's no funding set against this, but we kind of wanted to bring this one to your attention as well, because all strategic authorities and local authorities have been tasked by government to produce a local Get Britain working plan. So it's part of the Get Britain working white paper that came out. It is a real opportunity for us to bring together. I mean, you can see just from the list that's up there, there's a lot going on in this area. And that's just kind of what the combined authority is doing. There's a lot more out there as well. So with this plan, it's a real opportunity to strategically try and bring together a lot of this provision and hopefully have greater impact by doing that. So we have to work with Department for Work and Pensions, Integrated Care Board, our 2 local authorities to come together across the work, health and skills landscape to say what's happening, how can we make this work more effectively together. So we're currently working on that plan. We're aiming to have that published by November. And to launch that at an event at the end of November as well. So this work really does build on a lot of the Trailblazer work as well. So it has 3 priorities that align very, very closely. So we're looking at supported pathways for local people. We're looking at enabling good work. So that's very much that employer piece. And then a strand around strategic alignment and collaboration. So this plan, it's a 10-year plan, and we're tasked with coming up with some more priority actions over the first 1 to 2 years. But it is a long-term plan, but it's a real opportunity for us all to start working much more closely together. So we've set up a steering group to oversee the work on this, and that steering group will have the role of monitoring and reviewing the plan. So the first edition that we get published in November will be the first iteration of this, and that draft plan will be brought to the Combined Authority at the October meeting. So really, in terms of this report, so there you go. It was really just, like I said, to bring you up to speed on what's happening and the progress that we're making across that very broad landscape.
Thank you. I did say you were in the starting blocks, and by God, you were. Whistle stop tour of that one. First councillor with a question is Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, Chair. Are you happy now? You've got it. Good. Right. Consider yourself got, Chair. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive report. My question to you, and I was delighted that it's a 10-year programme. My question to you is it really targeted? So do we know that, for example, we need 10 more bricklayers next year, for example, and therefore we've got places for 10 bricklayers, or is it more generic than that? Because what I'm really after is how are we measuring the success of what we're doing? Because we're spending an awful lot of money here, but are we really getting what's our return on this investment, and how do we know to redeploy it to certain other areas, for example? Thank you, Chair.
I think just on one point of that is all these programs have got lots of metrics attached, and therefore there will be a lot of monitoring of where the money goes and who is benefiting from it. I think the other side of it is also how this fits into the broader strategies and plans that are going on across the Combined Authority area, in terms of how it's addressing particular issues. And there's a connection between where we're seeing some skill shortages through the evidence, and where therefore then programs should be pushed to. Certainly on skills boot camps, that is very much done from an evidence base of where are the needs within certain sectors or certain skills sets. So there will be the procurements that go out are very targeted at certain particular things. So any information that we get from the delivery end then feed back into the beginning to then feed what comes next, and that's part of the process that we go through evaluation and everything else. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
And just to say, yeah, in terms of the kind of priority that's all around the joining up, that integration of data and research is really important in terms of how we move this forward. So there's a lot of work that's actually going into that piece. I think we also recognise that whilst there are national kind of metrics that have been set, we need to look at what's really happening in our own kind of labour market, and it is quite different. So for example, on the Get York and North Yorkshire working plan, the government priority there is an 80% employment rate. We've already got 79.2% in terms of our employment rate, but that's not to say there aren't issues in our labour market that we need to look at. So alongside what's been set in terms of the kind of national programmes, we're looking at very local indicators that really kind of get underneath, being led by the data and the research that we've got to inform that, so that we can actually make sure it's as targeted as possible. But I think we do recognise there's further work to do around how we measure things. But like I said, the 10-year plan gives us some time to actually do that.
Please, Chair. So my question really then would be, can you share some of this data with us? Because our role is to scrutinise, and therefore, call me old-fashioned, but people do what you inspect, not what you expect. And I think that's a great adage for anybody in any level of authority. So I would just ask that you share some of the data with us, and then perhaps you'll get a different outside opinion. And I'm sure we've all got different backgrounds. in different businesses, and we might be able to add value to the work you're doing. Thank you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be critically important. I think there's two aspects to that. One is that data and intelligence that's at the front end of things. I think we produce certainly the front end of the strategy will have quite a lot of information and data that we'll be able to share, maybe have further discussions at further meetings about. I think the other side is obviously the almost the outputs that come from the programs that we've been looking to deliver, and obviously some of us haven't fed that way through yet because we're only at the starting point. So once that information comes through, again, we can report that back into here. So I would say there's two aspects of the data. One is that broader information intelligence. One is what is it that's actually being delivered through the programs.
Councillor Basterman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tracy, for the report. I presume under construction and built environment, Tracy, does that cover construction skills villages, or is it just one?
I'll jump in on that one. It's fine. Because this is surrounding this, we've got some skills boot camps that are within that sector. It's not specifically surrounding the construction skills villages. No, it's we've got a number of different providers that are delivering a range of different skills boot camps. So we've got things like plant operations, we've got some CAD design, that kind of thing, but it's very focused on specific, because skills boot camps have got a very specific remit, and it's got job outcomes. So from an outcomes perspective, we've got some very specific outcomes as well. It's got to be a 16-week course. So the funding goes specifically towards a certain programme, and we've got a list of a number of different programmes under construction and the built environment, particularly because with skills boot camps, we were recently given an additional 200,000 within that budget. So that's part of the 2.9 million to go out specifically for construction and the built environment, which is why we've got some additional boot camps on there surrounding that.
Thanks, Jeff. And whilst I may get shot down for saying this, that whilst there is an importance for doing sales, marketing, advanced digital technologies, to me the most important thing, and we were discussing earlier about delivering properties and housing and one thing and another, is the training of construction workers. And, you know, no doubt some members may not agree with me, but Andrew knows where I'm coming from with this. It's vitally important to get the trades out there, because not every child leaving school or university or leaving school wants to go to university. They're very good with their hands, but academically they're not interested. Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Vicky.
I will just say that particularly from what was DFE and is now becoming DWP, there is a real focus. There was an announcement this year where there was not a lot of additional monies going into construction skills package, and that's over a range of different programmes that are going to be delivered and that are going to be released. So there was the additional 160,000 that went into the adult skills fund that will very specifically be focused on construction skills. The additional 200,000 for skills boot camps, although we'd already gone out and procured some construction before that point. So that is on top of what was already in existence. There's a lot of other work going on. So we've recently had the Construction Technical Excellence Colleges that Leeds College of Building were successful in getting, but we're working collaboratively in the region for Yorkshire and Humber to make sure that that hub and spoke model, that we benefit from that in this region as well, and that can assist us. And there's a lot more coming out as well. So we are working very, very closely, for example, with Sharon, looking at the housing strategies to see how we can align all of these different things and make sure that where we're seeing that we've got skills gaps, we are looking at making sure that we are directing the funds in the right place to make sure that we've got the right skills in the area.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. And my questions follow on quite neatly from the previous questions. When we first received a report on the Trailblazer, I asked then about funding that was available to schools to help avoid people falling into the NEET category. And I did put a head teacher in touch with it. I'm not seeing that in this, and I would like to, because I think it ties in with if you can maintain kids' interest in school by providing them with a career option that fits with them, they're not all going to go to university, and that's just how life is. But we've got to recognise that cohort of young people, some of whom need that additional resource, and that this is an opportunity. So that would give deliverable outcomes and ensure that it's cheaper to do it that way than turn people around when they're 18, 19, and they've not been familiar with work. The other aspect is, it connects with the data, is that representing an area which is a pocket of deprivation within the city, and we get patronised a lot by professionals pointing the finger and saying, oh, this, that, the other. I would need to see that this is having an impact on my community. And this is a very high level report. I ask the people on the ground who are in partner organisations, have they seen any of this money? And they're not. So I am worried that the people on the ground who are providing that early help, that signposting, are disconnected from this. And you may be connecting them in the future, but I'm not seeing that. And it's vital that in the data and the outputs, we're able to show that you are reaching the people that you want to reach, in order that you get people into work who just need that bit of extra help and guidance. Thank you, Chair.
I'll start with your young persons one that you raised first, if that's okay. Some of this is down to eligibility around funding programmes. So I think when I did present to you last, I did outline that this was a working age funded programme. So anything that's under the age of 16 isn't actually eligible for this programme. However, we made a very good case to DWP when we put in our delivery plan to say that, particularly in terms of our labour market and economy, we need to do preventative work with young people and with families. They agreed to that, and they've allowed us to have some elements of delivery that are targeting that group and are targeting families as well. And actually, I've got a meeting with them later today where they've specifically asked for an update on what's happening around those projects, because we are the only trailblazer that is prioritising that age group. So that is happening. We will be seeing some activity on the ground, and it kind of links into your next question, that we are only just at the point now of issuing those grant funding agreements. So money hasn't flowed hugely yet. Yeah, we've had some delivery on the ground, yeah, but that will be coming through really soon, because those grant funding agreements are being signed. I think North Yorkshire's was signed on Friday. We're now currently trying to work with York to get theirs over the line as well as soon as we can. So that money will start to flow. Those organisations will see that. They are involved through both councils in the discussions that we've been having about how we can get delivery on the ground. So that is all in train. I think it's taken, and this is the same across the country, it's taken time to get a programme like this off the ground. The fact we've got year 2 means we can really build on what we've put in place in year 1 and really see that delivery on the ground in year 2.
The only supplementary would be about connecting with small businesses. That the majority of people in the York and North Yorkshire work for a small business, but they don't have the time to do all the engagement. So it's ensuring that's included in the matrix, because they need to be an important part of increasing employment.
And yeah, just to come back on that, we have literally just gone out with £1 million worth of support through Trailblazer around an employer support programme. Now that is targeting SMEs right across the area and targeting them so that we can provide them with additional support, recognising they don't always have the time to do this, yeah. Actually giving them mentoring support, one-to-one consultancy support to kind of walk alongside them, to support them on recruitment and retention and those issues that will enable them to kind of, fill those vacancies that they've got and actually have sustainable employment as well. So it is early days in this. What we like to think is that we will start to see that impact coming through as the money starts to flow, as those projects start to be delivered. We'll start to see that impact.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, actually. I'll try and be as I possibly can. How are you actually recruiting people who are not working currently onto the programmes?
The engagement side, particularly with the Trailblazer, is really central to how we do this, in recognition that a lot of these people, they're not turning up through the usual routes in terms of accessing support. So, I mean, one of our mechanisms is through the Better Connect project, because that has a partnership of over 30 voluntary community sector organisations working very much at a grassroots level that reach into those communities. They are trusted organisations within those communities. So that's one of the key ways in which we're able to engage with individuals. But we've also established a community grants pot as well through Trailblazer, which recognises that there are lots of organisations out there who are not involved through Better Connect or through other mechanisms that we have. And we've set up a fund to enable them to come up with some very small bespoke programmes and projects, literally to a neighbourhood level. It could be at street level. So we can start to engage more with people on the ground within their communities. So we're trying through a variety of mechanisms to try and make sure we can get out there and actually reach those people, because they're not turning up through the usual routes. You know, so can we work through food banks? Can we work through local schools, libraries, you know, different ways of actually reaching people? So we have a number of mechanisms that are about reaching into those communities.
Okay, and have you reached out, and have you been able to recruit? Because I can only find this number of 123 individuals on page 57 that have been recruited so far.
Was that on
page 57, 7.5?
Yes. We only started that provision in May, so it's going to take time to build that up. So yes, that's the level. I mean, we're over that. I think we're over 200 now. That we will see those numbers start to come through. So there's also money that's going to be flowing through some of the family and community hubs in York, through the mental health hubs as well. So we've got a range of projects that are going to start to happen where they will be engaging with people, and we'll see those numbers increase.
That's good. And is there any way of getting independent feedback from these people who you're recruiting, to see what their experience is like of the programme? I think I asked this at a sort of a subgroup meeting of your programme, and I think it came across, wasn't clear what I was asking for, because I asked about safeguarding, but I'm very concerned about what the experience is of the people who are going through this, because they're quite often vulnerable people, and I worry about exploitation, because that's something that happens, and I just want to know how sure you can be to protect these people from any pressures or undue pressures, so that they're getting the experience that we want them to have, and not to be bullied, for instance, into doing something that they don't want to do.
I mean, there's a couple of routes there, more from kind of the evaluation and knowing whether it's working, whether it's helping, whether it's the right kind of support. So we have some research funding that's going to be working with particular groups and asking them what's their experience so far, not just of Trailblazer, but wider employment support. That will hopefully give us some insights into some of the issues you're referencing there. You know, has it worked? Has it been the right type of support in the right way at the right time? Have they felt comfortable with that? So the research will help with some of that. We've also got quite an extensive evaluation planned through Trailblazer that will work with the individuals and with the projects to say, how has this worked? Has it actually achieved what we wanted it to, and in the way we wanted it to achieve? But on top of that, I think all the programmes and projects that we work with have to have that level of safeguarding in place. That is a requirement in terms of what we deliver and how we deliver, so that those policies and kind of checks and balances are in place in terms of delivery as well.
I don't know whether it is possible for councillors, you know, to meet eventually with some of the people on these schemes, to also ask them about how this is going at some point. I mean, obviously later down the line.
So I can see, yeah, regularly, particularly through the Better Connect programme, there's been a number of events and things where they've actually worked with the individuals and brought them along, and they've been able to kind of tell their stories and meet with other partners as well. So I'm sure we can inform you when there's events and things happening, and if you want to attend that would be fine.
And not just people who are chosen. I'd like to see people who are not chosen, to be honest, because I think that's sometimes going to be the issue. And the very last thing on here, I noticed on 6.5, a market warming event for stakeholders and partners took place 11th of July to share the proposed delivery model, gain their feedback and share details and timeline for the procurement process. Is this sort of small and medium businesses? Or, I mean, how is it going with recruiting people to employ people who have not been in the employment market for some time, and how to support them?
So that one was a reference to the Connect to Work programme. So yes, we had that event that attracted 30 plus different organisations of various sizes. So some that have been involved more in DWP, large scale delivery, down to some of our smaller providers as well across the region. So they were kind of updated on what was happening around the commissioning model for Connect to Work. That will be going out to procurement in the next few weeks. So we will hopefully get a lot of interest from right across the board in terms of the size of providers as well.
Right.
So
Okay.
does that answer your question?
Sort of. So it's ongoing really, and you haven't got at the moment a pool of organisations, of employers yet who are willing to take people on.
From the employer perspective, there is in Connect to Work, there's a specific role that we're funding that is an employer engagement role that will be tasked with working with employers to identify which employers might be interested in taking part, what support they need, and how we can help with that. So that is an integral part of the programme as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when do you envisage people starting to work? Because
the programme Connect to Work one won't start until January of next year, but the aim of the programme is to get people into work as quickly as possible. So it's not kind of a long build-up programme. This is a short, intensive piece of work, and then they're into work. So if we start in January, we should be seeing people being placed into employment within the first 3 months.
And you're working with
Councillor Burton. I've been very tolerant to this point. Could I ask that you follow up with the officers after the meeting? You. Now I have two councillors who still wish to ask questions, and then I propose drawing a line. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's very much come back to the sort of original questions about the where the skills gaps are, because I'm sort of sat here thinking, well, the CA and all this is very new, but then a lot of it has been let beforehand and everything like that. And I'm thinking it's really important, what wouldn't have happened were it not for this money. And I see some amounts there which are, quite round figures and everything like that. So the whole point, I think now for where I would see success is like Councillor Haslam's example. It's if you have a builder who says, we have a lack of this particular job and trade, how can we respond? And that undoubtedly, as Councillor Basman said, that's undoubtedly a gap now. So I think that's sort of real world examples. It'd be great for me to see, months or a year down the line, we were contacted by this builder or this builders federation, and they said, we just can't get these people, and this is what difference it's making. And you signposted, you set something, and that'd be really positive. My question was just going to be on age of people. So I think all the sort of programs are broadly, one age, aren't they? Over 18, and that's the simple criteria. And it's the extent to which it's worth doing things which are age targeted to emphasize to people that everything is for them potentially. So I'll give you an example, which it sounds a silly example, but nightclubs advertise a night for people in their 40s. Okay, now if you're in your 40s like me, you could go to a nightclub any night, but they're almost saying, we don't expect you to be there on that night. Here is your own night. And I think potentially in the people who are in the council, you don't need to look that confused, Councillor Waller. It's it's a bit like that for me. That I think there'll be a lot of people out there in the workplace who would want retraining, but they'll think that's not going to be for me because everybody there is going to be 19, 20 and 21. But if we actually do some particular targeted things. And it could be quite literally, it could be holding the exact same events for people who are over 50 as people who are under 50. But I just think that's potentially a way to get more people to see it as something for them, rather than, you know, as we know, we're all old dogs and we can't be taught new tricks, but we potentially can. So hopefully that's a question in some way.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that one. I'll not use the same examples. What I would say is we do work really closely with our providers, so it's not necessarily the combined authority's role to push out the programs that they're delivering. So it is the provider's role, but we do provide a really supportive role in that instance. Speaking from an adult schools fund and schools bootcamp perspective, a real big part of the strategy that we've got is actually looking at accessibility and flexibility of courses as well, because quite often when you're looking at older learners, that's something that we've got to consider. So we've got to consider the fact that if they are in full-time work, it can't just be your typical 9 to 5 in a college delivery and provision that's available. So we are looking at ways that we can actually push the fact that we've got evening courses or weekend courses or flexible courses, looking at modular or bite-sized training. It's a big part of the skills strategy and of the Adult Skills Fund strategic skills plan as well, that we've got that. And then that we can focus that on when we are looking at communicating out to residents, that we are looking at those types of priorities to make sure that all age groups are covered in what we can provide with the delivery. We have lots of engagement events and celebration events as well that we push out, and we make sure that when we are doing that, we've got a very diverse range of individuals that we're looking at, that we can put out there. So, you know, looking at the different types of age groups that can be covered, because like with the Adult Skills Fund, there are a lot of, we've got quite a high portion in this area of some of older learners that are going through that. So we make sure that when we are looking at different ways that we can communicate out what's available, we can make sure that we are targeting in the correct way the right audiences. And I don't know if you want to mention something about the interchange, Tracy?
Well, I think there's a few points, and coming back to what we said about being kind of data-led, a lot of our data is telling us we've got an ageing workforce, we've got issues around health linked to that as well. So particularly in some of the programs now that have that health and that employability focus, there's a recognition that we do need to do some targeting around specific groups. So for example, through Trailblazer, we've actually got a program that's going to be delivered through the local authorities across both areas. I think it's called Inspiring Potential in the 50 plus. I think that's what they've given it as a working title, but that's very much about targeting our engagement and our provision to that age group, recognizing that they have existing skills that they may not be fully using. You know, how do we make them aware of career-wise what the labour market looks like now? It may look very different to when they first joined it. So there's a lot that's actually happening in that space that is about targeting, but it's data-led. It comes from what the data tells us about where we've got vacancies, where we've got issues with particular cohorts and age groups. The same with the younger age group as well. There's some targeted provision for them, recognising that we've kind of got a disengagement at the younger end and a disengagement to an extent at the older end. So, you know, what do we do about that? So just some kind of reassurances, I suppose, that we are looking at targeting that and what we can do on the ground to kind of make that happen. You mentioned the interchange. You might have to prompt me there.
It's just about once it's developed, the way that we'll be able to target different audiences for interchange and different.
So the interchange is our way of kind of coordinating lots of information and support that we've got out there, because we recognise it's really confusing for individuals. So what we'll be able to do with that then is to look at how the information that we put out there is targeting those particular groups and saying this is something that might be able to support you, and it can support in this way. So we will have some mechanisms in place that will be able to support that as well.
Councillor Merritt.
Yeah. Could I first say just how impressive it is in terms of what you've managed to do and are doing in such a short period of time from go. I'm enormously thankful for everything you're doing. However, I'd like to come back to the questions Councillor Haslam was asking at the beginning. Obviously, extremely pleased to hear that there are detailed metrics for each of these projects and so on, or admittedly the DWPs. What I'd like to understand is what is the reporting framework within the combined authority, how are the appropriate metrics reported back to the CA? How are we comparing our performance with other authorities in terms of comparisons to see that we are both getting effective delivery, value for money, all those types of issues. So it's what is the performance management framework for all of this at a sort of strategic level, rather than us just asking questions about this bit and that bit and the rest of it.
I think, I mean, in essence, there's a number of things as part of a framework. So from a very operational detail level, a lot of the metrics are gathered through various different ways, individual learning records, all sorts of things will give us the outputs. Those in general are reported through internally within the officer groups that we have. So we have a programme officer group just to make sure that that is overseeing the delivery. And that programme officer group will be reporting through to our leadership team within the CA, but also to the combined authority itself. And we are starting to look at full sort of almost performance reporting going through into the combined authority, so that we can actually see those things. Now, obviously, as the further up that ladder it goes, the less granular I would say it becomes, because obviously we can't share individual learning records with anybody. It therefore becomes much more strategic in the performance. So it is a developing model, but that's generally how it works at the moment, is gather information, report to programme board reports to our leadership team on performance, and then that will go into the CA. Yeah.
Yeah, much as I said that I would not have any more questions, Councillor Haslam has assured me he's got a very, very short, very direct question. And that's it.
Yes, okay. So my question is Better Connect. Can councillors be on that link? Because I effectively have lots of people in my ward that could benefit from this and don't know where to look. End of.
So when you say link, you're referring to?
The Better Connect. You talked about a Better Connect network where you talk to all these other people, or why can't you put the councillors on there? Because I'd be willing to be a councillor, and I could actually, because I talk to people in my ward all the time. I suppose each of us have got about 3,000 people in our ward. If we're helping you capture people, so why can't we be on the Better Connect mail shot?
I think we could look to see, because we are looking, particularly through the work of the interchange that Vicky mentioned, about how we reach different audiences and what kind of information is useful for them to have. So seeing lots of these touch points and people as being kind of navigators in themselves around the system and how they can support that. So take that point completely, and we'll look to see what we can do.
Chair, would you excuse me, please, because I have a train to catch, but thank you very much for your indulgence.
Sorry, I was just quickly going to add that obviously there's a caveat to all of that, which is around who's accredited and not in terms of dealing with individuals. So although we need to get the messages out, there are systems in place to ensure that.
If I just put that, if I put the detail on my councillor Facebook page, that's all, I'm not, I personally am DBS checked because I'm a trustee of an academy, but I get all that, and I get the points that Councillor Burton raised around safeguarding. Thank you, Chair.
So moving to the recommendation, hurrah. To acknowledge the progress being made in relation to the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority skills and employment activities. Are we all okay to go with the recommendation on that? Yeah, I'm seeing the line of nodding heads. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentations. We'll move on to the really exciting stuff now, our work stack. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. So just to look at the work programme for the next meeting, which is on just before Christmas, on the 18th of December at County Hall. And we've got the usual Q&A session with the Mayor. I've also got penciled in the public consultation and engagement strategy, and also the corporate plan coming forward to that meeting. I have left an additional slot. I don't know if there's any appetite for anything that's come out of today. I know we mentioned about transport and whether that's the right time for that, or whether it could possibly slip to March. I'll just have to gauge that. I think it's based on who the head of transport, when they're in post and things. But certainly that's on my radar in terms of things coming out of this meeting. But happy to accept any further comments and queries from members.
Anyone got? You said over easy.
Mince pies.
Was that you?
Your waistline, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering about the way we're operating. I know, as I also sit on West Yorkshire Combined Authority, it's quite interesting comparing how they operate and how we operate. And also, obviously, we've scrutiny in our own in the York Authority. West Yorkshire's made a real effort to try and become much more strategic in terms of its operation, and obviously that's partly linked to the government's expectations of awarding strategic authority status, which I'm anticipating York and North Yorkshire will want to do in due course. And therefore there's a sort of much greater emphasis on where the Scrutiny Committee can make a genuine difference, where can it do pre-scrutiny, as opposed to, in effect, we're getting, the sessions we're having are very useful, but they are sort of briefings and updates, rather than sort of engaging in terms of where we can add value. So I think there's an issue here about perhaps reviewing how we operate, how we could potentially operate more strategically and differently in terms of that added value approach. So is that something we can perhaps do in one of our sort of informal meeting sessions at an appropriate point, perhaps with somebody from outside to act as a facilitator and to talk through how we might, what others do, how we might perhaps alter how we function and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've been sitting at the back all meeting, so I think that's a perfectly legitimate query, and I think we think back to the early meetings last year when the committee was first convening. I think we all had a view in the work programme that we needed a certain amount of development and upskilling to understand what the combined authority was and what devolution would mean over the coming year. So a lot of the work that we've had programmed in has been around those introductions to the services, to officers, and the programmes and funding streams that were coming in. We probably now are at a stage now where we can start looking back over the performance over the previous year, and now starting to look at what these mean in practice and how we want to get involved in the next round of opportunities. And as you say, if a single settlement is on the cards in future when the devolution bill passes through Parliament, then that may well be something that this committee wants to take a view on. So I'd be guided by members and through you, Chair, about the best way to facilitate that, whether we have officers in-house do it or whether we could try and get somebody independent just to try and get the conversation flowing. But yeah, quite happy to organise that either through one of the informal sessions or a standalone session.
I think initially it would be worth using our own internal people, which is informal. Until we've had the meeting, we won't know what we're actually forming and what we're proposing to go forward. So at this stage, I think I prefer to use internal resource rather than go looking outside. Anyone got any views on that?
Very, very, very quickly, Chair, but within the capacity that we have in the team as well, one thing
that we've started to do, as you might have seen, we've got more regular updates going out from the team to members around what's going on in the combined authority. The idea behind that is to try and support you members in your role as a combined authority scrutiny member, and same for business board and audit and governance. What I would like to try and introduce as the team develops over the next year is to try and get some more member development in place as well. I know you'll both have member development programs at your respective councils that focus on your councillor role. But if we can try and supplement that in some way without duplicating what you get at City of York and North Yorkshire around your role as a strategic scrutiny member on the combined authority, we'll certainly try and develop that as well.
Yep. When we get that on the radar going forward, Will, get it scheduled in. So.
Well, I've had this director of transport appointed, you would think. And there's been a lot of conversations and comments, questions this morning regarding transport. Wouldn't it be a good idea to invite him along? And there was enough from this morning's meeting to give us a bit of an update on what his thoughts were.
I have to agree with your initial thoughts, but I think if we're just at the point where we're recruiting him now, he's not going to be in a position to give us a great deal of detail. He's probably just starting to feel his own position within the team, etc. I would look at scheduling him for the following meeting on the grounds he'll have had a reasonable length of time to understand what the challenges are and actually come up with what his views going forward are. So I think probably the December meeting would be a little bit too soon, but I'll be led by members.
It's a supplementary to my first question rather than on that particular suggestion. Thank you for the response in terms of development type work and re-looking at how we operate. If I come back to the point about pre-scrutiny, I think one of the things that would be useful when we look at the work programme is also to have the links to the combined authorities forward plan, and specifically making an effort to identify which key decisions are coming up, where there would be a sensible role for us in terms of pre-scrutiny. So trying to act more strategically in that sense as well. So that's another change I hope we could perhaps incorporate going forward.
Yeah. I mean, the link is included on the document, but certainly make it a bit more clearer. And as you say, highlighting those key decisions, we can certainly do more of.
Yeah, moving on. Any urgent business? Right, I remind you that the date of the next meeting is the 18th of December. Bring your party hats and your streamers. I'm sure it'll be exciting. So that'll close the meeting. Thank you for your indulgence. Yeah.